What is up, everybody? We're on day 70 of our Bible in a Year series. Almost done with Joshua. We have today and tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow will be the last day in Joshua. So it's moving through it pretty quickly. After that, we'll get on to Judges. But today, we're not quite done yet. So let's go back into Joshua 19 is where we are today. If you don't have a way to follow along, I'm reading out of the CSB. That's what we're doing this go around. If you don't have a way to follow along, it'll be on the screen if you're watching. That's not helpful if you're just listening. But if you're interested, in the description, there's a link to it's a Bible I typically use. It's a CSB Apologetic Study Bible. Phenomenal resource, phenomenal Bible. And there's also a link to a video of kind of a review of that, why I suggest it so highly. So let's get started. Joshua 19. The second lot came out for Simeon, for the tribe of his descendants, by their clans, but their inheritance was within the inheritance given to Judah's descendants. Their inheritance included Beersheba, or Sheba, Moladah, Hazar Shual, Bala, Ezem, Eltolad, Bethuel, Hormah, Ziklag, Beth Markoboth, Hazar Susa, Beth Lebaoth, and Sharohin, 13 cities with their settlements, Ain, Rimmon, Ether, and Ashan, 4 cities with their settlements, and all the settlements surrounding these cities as far as Balath Beer, Ramah in the south. This was the inheritance of the tribe of Simeon's descendants by their clans. The inheritance of Simeon's descendants was within the territory of Judah's descendants because the share for Judah's descendants was too large. So Simeon's descendants received an inheritance with Judah's portion, within Judah's portion. The third lot came up for Zebulun's descendants by their clans. The territory of their inheritance stretched as far as Sarid. Their border went up westward to Maralah, reached Dabesheth, and met the brook east of Jokneam. From Sarid, it turned due east along the border of Chisloth Tabor, went to Daberath, and went up to Japhia. From there, it went due east to Gath Hefer and to Eth Kazan. It extended to Rimmon, curving around to Neah. The border then circled around Neah on the north to Hanathon and ended at Iftah El Valley, along with Kata, Nahalal, Shimron, Adalal, and Bethlehem, 12 cities with their descendants. This was the inheritance of Zebulun's descendants by their clans, these cities with their settlements. The fourth lot came out for the tribe of Issachar's descendants by their clans. The territory went to Jezreel and included Chesuloth, Shunem, Hapharaim, Shion, Enaharath, Rabbith, Kishion, Ebez, Remeth, Inganim, In Hada, and Beth Pazaz. The border reached Tabor, Shahuzamah, and Behemash, and ended at the Jordan, 16 cities with their settlements. This was the inheritance of the tribes of Issachar's descendants by the clans, the cities with their settlements. Now, remember, part of the purpose of having this written out like this is to show the fulfillment of what God had promised previously. So this can seem boring to read at times. I will admit it, but there is purpose behind it. It's included for a reason. So we need to read it. Verse 24. The fifth lot came out for the tribes of Asher's descendants by their clans. Their boundary included Helkath, Hali, Beton, Akshaph, Alamelech, Ahmad, and Mishal. and reached westward to Carmel and Shehor Libnath. It turned eastward to Beth Dagon, reached Zebulun and Iftah El Valley, north toward Beth-emek and Neiel, and went north to Kabul, Hebron, Rehob, Hammon, and Kana, as far as Greater Sidon. The boundary then turned to Ramah as far as the fortified city of Tyre. It turned back to Hosah and ended at the Mediterranean Sea, including Mahalab, Akzib, Umah, Aphek, and Rohab, 22 cities with their settlements. This was the inheritance of the tribe of Asher's descendants by their clans, these cities with their settlements. The sixth lot came out for Naphtali's descendants by their clans. Their boundary went from Heleph and from the oak in Zananim, including Adami, Nekeb, and Jabneel, as far as Lacham, and ended at the Jordan. To the west, the boundary turned to Aznoth Tabor, and went from there to Hukok, reaching Zebulun on the south, Asher on the west, and Judah at the Jordan on the east. The fortified cities were Ziddim, Zair, Hamath, Rakoth, Chinnereth, Adama, Ramah, Hazor, Kadesh, Edrei, and Hazor, Iron, Migdal El, Horem, Beth-anath, and Beth Shemesh, 19 cities with their settlements. This was the inheritance of the tribe of Naphtali's descendants by their clans, the cities with their settlements. The seventh lot came out for the tribes of Dan's descendants by their clans. The territory of their inheritance included Zorah, Eshtaol, Ir Shemesh, Shalabin, Aijalon, Ithla, Elon, Timnah, Ekron, Elatek, Gibbethon, Baalath, Jehud, Beni Barak, Gath Rimmon, Mejarkon, I don't know, and Rakon, with the territory facing Joppa. When the territory of the descendants of Dan slipped out of their control, they went up and fought against Leshem, captured it, and struck it down with the swords. They took possession of it, lived there, and renamed Leshem after their ancestor Dan. This was the inheritance of the tribe of Dan's descendants by their clans, these cities with their settlements. When they had finished distributing the land into its territories, the Israelites gave Joshua son of Nun an inheritance among them. By the Lord's command, they gave him the city Timnath-Serah in the hill country of Ephraim, which he requested. He rebuilt the city and lived in it. These were the portions that the priest Eleazar, Joshua son of Nun, and the family heads distributed to the Israelites, tribes by lot at Shiloh in the Lord's presence at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So they finished dividing up the land. Chapter 20. Then the Lord spoke to Joshua, "Tell the Israelites, select your cities of refuge, as I instructed you through Moses, so that a person who kills someone unintentionally or accidentally may flee there. These will be your refuge from the avenger of blood. When someone flees to one of these cities, stands at the entrance of the city gate, and states his case before the elders of that city, they are to bring him into the city and give him a place to live among them. And if the avenger of blood pursues him, they must not hand the one who committed manslaughter over to him, for he killed his neighbor accidentally and did not hate him beforehand. He is to stay in that city until he stands trial before the assembly and until the death of the high priest serving at that time. Then the one who committed manslaughter may return to his own city from which he fled." So they designated Kedesh in the hill country of Naphtali in Galilee, Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim, and Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the hill country of Judah. Across the Jordan, east of Jericho, they selected Bezer in the wilderness plateau from Reuben's tribe, Ramoth in Gilead and Gad's tribe, and Golan from the Bashan from Manasseh's tribe. These are the cities appointed for all Israelites and the aliens residing and the aliens residing among them, so that anyone who kills a person unintentionally may flee there and not die at the hand of the avenger of blood until he stands before the assembly. Chapter 21. Now, remember and it did kind of touch on this a little bit, but I'm blanking on what they're called. The cities where you could flee to, this was not for someone who intentionally went out and murdered somebody, right? The purpose here is if there's an accidental homicide. So what we today maybe would say as reckless homicide, or something along those lines. So this is if someone accidentally does this, there's a way for them to be safe. And I think this is an interesting idea. So let's see, chapter 21. The Levite family heads approached the priest Eleazar, Joshua son of Nun, and the family heads of the Israelite tribes. At Shiloh, in the land of Canaan, they told them, the Lord commanded through Moses that we be given cities to live in, with their pasture lands for our livestock. So the Israelites, by the Lord's command, gave the Levites these cities with their pasture lands from the inheritance. The lot came out for Gohathite clans, for the Gohathite clans. The Levites, who were the descendants of the priests, Aaron received 13 cities by lot from the tribes of Judah, Simeon, and Benjamin. The remaining descendants of Kohath received 10 cities by lot from the clans of the tribes of Ephraim, Dan, and half the tribe of Manasseh. Gershon's descendants received 13 cities by lot from the clans of the tribes of Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, and half the tribe of Manasseh in Bashan. Merari's descendants received 12 cities for their clans from the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and Zebulun. The Israelites gave these cities with their pasture lands around them to the Levites by lot, as the Lord had commanded through Moses. The Israelites gave these cities by name from the tribes of the descendants of Judah and Simeon to the descendants of Aaron from the Kohathite clans of the Levites, because they received the first lot. They gave them Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron. Arba was the father of Anak, with its surrounding pasture lands in the hill country of Judah. But they gave the fields in the settlements of the city to Caleb, son of Jephunneh, as his possession. They gave to the descendants of the priest Aaron Hebron, the city of refuge for the one who commits manslaughter, with its pasture lands, Libnah with its pasture lands, Jadar with its pasture lands, Esthemoa with its pasture lands, Holon with its pasture lands, Deborah with its pasture lands, Ain with its pasture lands, Judah with its pasture lands, and Beth Shemesh with its pasture lands. 9 cities from these 2 tribes. From the tribe of Benjamin, they gave Gibeon with its pasture lands, Geba with its pasture lands, Anathoth with its pasture lands, and Almon with its pasture lands, 4 cities. All 13 cities with their pasture lands were for the priests, the descendants of Aaron. The allotted cities to the remaining clans of Kohath's descendants, who were Levites, came from the tribe of Ephraim. The Israelites gave them Shechem, the city of refuge for the one who commits manslaughter, with its pasture lands in the hill country of Ephraim, Gezer with its pasture lands, Kibzaim with its pasture lands, Beth Horon with its pasture lands, 4 cities. From the tribe of Dan, they gave Eltek with its pasture lands, Gibbethon with its pasture lands, Ajalon with its pasture lands, and Gath Rimmon with its pasture lands, 4 cities. From half the tribe of Manasseh they gave Tanakh with its pasture lands, and Gath Rimmon with its pasture lands, 2 cities. All 10 cities with their pasture lands were for the clans of Kohath's other descendants. From half the tribe of Manasseh, they gave to the descendants of Gershon, who were one of the Levite clans, Golan, the city of refuge for the ones who committed manslaughter, with his pasture lands in Bashan, and Besh-terah with his pasture lands, 2 cities. From the tribe of Issachar, they gave Kishon with his pasture lands, Dabaroth with his pasture lands, Jarmuth with his pasture lands, and Engannim with his pasture lands. 4 cities. From the tribe of Asher they gave Mishal with his pasture lands, Abdon with his pasture lands, Helkath with his pasture lands, and Rehob with his pasture lands. 4 cities. From the tribe of Naphtali they gave Kedesh in Galilee, the city of refuge for the one who commits manslaughter, with his pasture lands, Hamath Dor with his pasture lands, and Kartan with his pasture lands. 3 cities. All 13 cities with the pasture lands were for the Gershonites by their clans. From the tribe of Zebulun they gave to the clans of the descendants of Merari, who were the remaining Levites, Jokneam with his pasture lands, Karta with his pasture lands, Dimnah with his pasture lands, and Naalal with his pasture lands. 4 cities. From the tribe of Reuben they gave Bezer with his pasture lands, Jazah with his pasture lands, Kedemoth with his pasture lands, and Maphath with his pasture lands. 4 cities. From the tribe of Gad they gave Ramad and Gilead, the city of refuge for one who commits manslaughter, with his pasture lands, Mahanaim with his pasture lands, Heshbon with his pasture lands, and Jazer with his pasture lands. 4 cities in all. All 12 cities were allotted to the clans of Merari's descendants, the remaining Levites. Within the Israelites' possession, there were 48 cities in all, with their pasture lands for the Levites. Each of these cities had its own surrounding pasture land. This was true for all the cities. So the Lord gave Israel all the land he had sworn to give their ancestors, and took possession of it and settled there. The Lord gave them rest on every side according to all he had sworn to their ancestors. None of their enemies were able to stand against them, for the Lord handed them all their enemies to them. None of the good promises the Lord had made to the house of Israel failed. Everything was fulfilled. Okay. Good stuff. Interesting stuff. So kind of off topic, or not really off topic, but I've always kind of wondered with the cities of refuge, what that would be like in comparison to living in another city, right? So you're more likely to have people fleeing to you. You have to assume there's probably going to be some people that maybe don't qualify to actually go there that are going to try to go there. So how would that be different? I mean, I'm sure it would be, they didn't have police, but for lack of a better term, it'd be policed differently, right? So, yeah, I don't know. Interesting. At least I think it's interesting. I might be the only one, but oh well, if I am. We have some questions to do, and let's jump straight into them. Question 1. The detailed land assignments in chapter 19 show God's promise fulfilled for each tribe. How does this attention to detail encourage us in our own waiting season? So we talked about this. We've talked about this a couple times, and I even mentioned it as I was reading through. But the purpose in going through this is, at least one of the purposes, is showing that God fulfilled what he said he was going to fulfill. Not just for us today, but for the Israelites at the time. This is something they could have gone back to, seen. And so it would show them not just like where the land's supposed to be, because remember, they give their land reverts back to the original clan ownership at the end of every 7 years, the year of Jubilee. So beyond that, there's a purpose in showing that God fulfilled what he said he was going to fulfill. God made a promise, and even though Israel dropped their side of the deal more times than we can count. God still held up his end of the deal. So I think there's a lot of purpose there with that. Question 2. The cities of refuge in chapter 20 offer protection and fairness. What do they reveal about God's heart for justice and mercy, and how might that apply today? God is just, and I think God wants justice. I think God rejoices in justice, right? Mercy also is something that is a character trait of God. So there, and you might think that these two things don't go well together, but think about Jesus on the cross, right? So justice needed to be served. There needed to be some type of atonement for the sin that we committed. Now, with that, there had to be some type of atonement. That's the justice part, right? Jesus steps in, this is the mercy part, and fulfills that on our behalf. Mercy is we don't get, or it ties in with grace too. It's the idea that you don't get what you deserve, especially when you don't get a negative that you deserve. So they can seem kind of contradictory, but I think when you look at it in a biblical lens, they actually are very, very intertwined. I think we see that with sort of Jesus. I think we see that with the city of refuge. It offers a place for people who accidentally do something that they can go and get mercy. But also they can still stand trial. And there still is possible justice for people who maybe wrongfully sought the city of refuge. It is in a way. This is the thing you'll see as you read through the Old Testament more. You'll start to see the story of Jesus more in the Old Testament, or aspects of the story of Jesus more in the Old Testament. The more you read through it, especially if you read through it in kind of in connection with the New Testament. I think it's good to read both. There's been people, Andy Stanley is one recently or semi-recently has made comments about we need to unhitch the Old Testament from Christianity, and it's included for a reason. It's there for a reason. There's a purpose in it. It's not a contradictory message to what we have in the New Testament. It is 100% a complementary message to what we have in the New Testament. So they need to be read together. It's good for them to be read together. Question 3. Joshua receives his own inheritance in chapter 19 after serving faithfully. What can we learn from his example about patience and trusting God's timing? So this is a cool element, right? We're not told beforehand that this is going to happen, but I think this shows, and I think if Moses had been allowed to go into the promised land, this would have been for Moses. But this is the God taking care of the leader that he had set in place that is going about things the right way and listening to God's orders. I think what we can take from this is that God is going to take care of his people. If God has called you to do something, he will provide for it. This doesn't always look the way that we think it will. It doesn't always look the way that we want it to. And it may not even always be in a way that seems like it makes sense in the here and now. I very much believe that if you lean on God, you will be provided more opportunities to lean on God. Now that means not knowing how everything's going to shake out. just trusting God that it's all going to shake out. And I think this is something, I mean, as far as we know, Joshua didn't pray or petition God for this, but God provided. So it's a very nice detail, I think, to see specifics there. So yeah, that is it for today. Appreciate everyone watching and listening to this point. If you're still watching, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe so you don't miss anything else that we have coming out. Have these daily Bible in a Year series that we're doing, and those will be every single day throughout the remainder of the year, and then we're going to start it again next year with a different translation. But on top of that, now that my schedule outside of this is starting to settle down a little bit, hoping to get back into some more additional things as well, some looking at cultural stuff, some more in-depth teaching, finally finish the fruit of the Spirit, and I have some other stuff in the works too that I've been kind of working on in the background. I just haven't had time to actually sit and record it all. So yeah, if that's of interest to you, don't forget to subscribe, notification bell. That way you don't miss whenever we release anything. If this has been a blessing to you, I ask that you share it. The word of mouth is the best way the podcast spreads. So you can share it with somebody else, you can bless them, and we can continue to spread the gospel and help edify people, build up their faith, and build good habits of like reading the Bible daily, and not just being something that you'll read 2 days in a row and then you don't read again for 3 days, and you read one day and then you don't read again for like 7 days, and then before you know it, you haven't read your Bible in like a month. And that's the whole purpose of this series, is trying to help people build a better routine by giving them someone that they can read along with every single day. So haven't missed a day yet. Don't plan to miss a day, and that'll be going on for the foreseeable future. So you can share this with other people. Maybe it'll help them to stick with their reading as well. And come back tomorrow. We will be at the end of the book of Joshua, getting ready to go on to Judges and some very interesting stories. But we'll finish up Joshua tomorrow, and I will see you then. God bless.